Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi and very good morning. It's morning there, right? In Kuala Lumpur is 5 o'clock in the late afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Ms. Sarima from National Islamic University Malaysia from Computer Science Department. So today I would like to share about this systematic literature review, okay, as requested by the organizer. So inshallah, I think I have around 45 minutes, right? Okay, to share about this thing. And
you have one hour, Prof. 1 hour.
1 hour. Okay. All right, that's good. So I believe you have heard about this systematic literature review or systematic review. All right. Basically, this is just one of the techniques available. Okay, one of the techniques that people do. Okay, in order to actually conduct literature review. So there are many methods out there. Okay, and normally people just use the normal way, which is the traditional way, right? For example, like you are collecting evidence, collecting all the studies, and then summarizing, and then try to do some analysis, comparing the findings and whatnot. But those are the traditional way. Okay? So, but what I like to share is a methodology, okay, a technique that has been used commonly, especially in my domain, yeah, in software engineering. And this technique is also commonly used in other domains like medicine, yeah, psychology, education. It's not really a new technique. It's been there for a while. So, as a postgraduate students. Okay, as a postgraduate students, this is one of the nightmares, okay, that you might experience towards the end of your study if you have not conducted your literature review properly. Okay, for example, if you can see it from the screen here, like maybe towards the end you discovered that someone else has actually, published perhaps something similar to what you are doing. Okay, so this is as a consequence of not doing a thorough literature review. So literature review is something that you have to be always alert, okay, and not necessarily that you do that during the first year of your studies. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me just share with you how people define this SLR or systematic literature review. As I said, this has been quite a while. Okay, but I would like to my sharing today is mostly from the domain of software engineering because I come from that domain. I think I would say my expertise in the empirical software engineering. So I mostly refer to this the work by Kitchener and Chart. They define systematic literature review as a form of secondary study. So literature review is a survey study, a secondary study that uses a well-defined methodology to identify, analyze, and interpret all available evidence related to specific research question in a way that is unbiased and to a degree repeatable. So you can see some keywords here. Okay, when you do literature review, it has got to do something with using certain methodology for you to be able to identify the existing studies, for you to be able to analyze the studies, for you to be able to interpret the evidence. Okay, and it says here all available evidence. It sounds like very exhaustive, yeah, all available evidence, because normally we have a very limited time to do literature review, isn't it? That is one of the challenges. But we should try our best to discover as much evidence as possible. When I say evidence here, it actually refers to any studies related to your domain. Okay, and one thing specific with this SLR is that there is a research question. Okay, so you have to actually formulate a kind of review question, okay, to guide the review process. Right? So the whole thing is that you are trying to actually come up with a review that is unbiased, okay, and to a certain degree repeatable. So because it's a well-defined methodology, it is expected to be unbiased. Why is it important to do literature review that is unbiased? Because there is a tendency, isn't it, when someone doing literature review, you tend to select only certain studies, certain papers, maybe up to your interest, isn't it? And maybe you try to ignore some other study that not really goes along with your idea. That is what we call as bias already. So we have to be fair, okay? We have to be fair, right? And to a degree repeatable means because we followed a proper methodology to do a literature review. So the process that we followed can be repeated or can be replicated by other researchers. So this is one of the strengths, I would say, of this methodology, systematic literature review. Okay, all right. So basically, there are 3 steps in conducting systematic review. The first phase is the planning, second phase is conducting phase, and the third one is reporting. So bear in mind that actually these are the generic process. Okay, it takes a lot of, actually quite a lot of time in terms of conducting as well as planning. Okay, I'm going to detail out. Okay, what is that inside the planning stage? So for the planning stage, what is important is that you have the focus. You need to have a focus. What your review will be about. What kind of literature review that you are interested to do or related to your thesis or research, or the one that is asked by your, requested by your supervisor. So the first thing is that based on that interest or focus, you need to come up with a proper review question or research question. So you see, you have an idea, okay, and then you have the focus. So from there, you think about what would be the review question for your literature, because in the end of the day, your aim is to answer this question from the studies that you are going to collect from this SLR or systematic literature review. Okay, and during the planning phase, this is actually the phase where you are developing the framework. So you have to come up with the review protocol, or we call as SLR framework. Okay, so that will give you like a framework. Okay, for example, what are the strategies that you will follow in conducting the SLR. So in order for you to come up with this protocol, you must understand what it takes to do SLR, okay, on top of having the review questions. So that is the first thing in the planning stage, having the focus. And then once you have set your focus, okay, once you have defined the research question, I'm not going to detail out now, okay, but later on, just here to give you the whole bird's eye view, the bird's eye view of the process, okay, the process, SLR process. So during conducting phase, during the conducting phase, this is the most, I would say, taxing, where you have to doing the searching. Okay, normally you have to do the search on online databases, and then you have to select relevant studies. Okay, and then you will do the data extraction, and then you will perform the quality assessment. And then finally, you will do the synthesis. You have to synthesize the finding, right? So it takes like 5 steps in conducting it. Not really a waterfall kind of thing, because it should be iterative. Because sometimes when you come at the stage of selecting primary studies, okay, you may discover something new, and then you might change something. You might maybe a little bit change your, maybe you need to tweak your question, or maybe you need to change a little bit in the protocol. So this is actually the whole thing is iterative. Of course, when you come to the point of synthesizing evidence, this is the last stage that you should not go back and then again search for more studies. No, that shouldn't be the way. What I say iterative is that when you are formulating the question, when you are selecting, perhaps even when you are extracting the data, you are still reviewing or still modifying your protocol to a certain extent. Okay, and then the final phase is that you have to do the reporting, okay, the writing, right? So it is encouraged for you, postgraduate students, to actually publish your SLR work, right? Because it actually can be considered a very important piece of work, right? So it should not end up just in the thesis, but I would like to advise that at the end of your SLR, you should immediately write it up and then submit it to. Okay, so all right, so these are the whole I would say the landscape, the structure of doing the SLR. It looks taxing, but actually it's really worth it to do it. Okay, and in order to conduct this SLR, okay, we have to refer to existing guidelines. As I said, there are actually a number of guidelines available. What I mostly refer to is the one by Kitchenham and Charters. All right, so procedures for performing systematic literature review in software engineering. There is also available books and guidelines in social sciences, for example, by Patrick and Roberts, and also by the healthcare, from healthcare domain. Okay, all right. So let me move on. Okay, because time is quite running. Okay, the first thing in SLR is that you need to define what will be the focus of your review. Okay, so when you have the focus, that is the expectation, that is the intention. So you need to actually come out or formulate a review question, or sometimes people call it a research question. So this is the most important part in SLR. Okay, you need to have a review question or a research question. So the question is not necessarily the same as question as addressed in your thesis, not necessarily. It's actually the question that you are wondering about something, okay? And that actually helps you to guide the search process, to guide the extraction process, and also in the end of the day, when you do the analysis, okay, when you do the data analysis or synthesis, it is expected to answer your SLR's review question or research question. Okay, so there are some techniques. Okay, some people suggest you to develop this 5 corp. Okay, you can use this 5 corp. Yeah, for example, to frame or to formulate a research question. If let's say, for example, you would like to do a systematic review about effectiveness about something. Maybe you wanted to study the effectiveness of agile methods. For example, like what I did last time was I would like to know how effective pair programming is. I was wondering because there are so many studies about pair programming. Okay, so is it really effective? Is it really good as people claim in the studies? So that's a question mark. So you should always wonder. Okay, you should always curious about. And then from there, you can actually come up with questions. Or you can actually define your question using this 5-corp framework. Okay, this 5-corp, for example, you define what is the population, intervention, comparison, outcomes, and context. So for example, here the population is what is the interest, the target interest. Are you interested to do review related to certain tools, or to do reviews related to certain models, to certain framework, or to certain people, to certain what? Okay, that is the population. Because if you don't zoom in, you will end up not having focus for your review. Okay, you need to have the focus. And then you would define, for example, the intervention that you would like to apply in the study. For example, you are looking to certain technology. You are looking at certain approaches or certain software tools or certain methodology. So intervention is basically what specifically object of interest for you. Okay, maybe you wanted to study testing techniques, one specific testing techniques. Maybe you are concerned about how people test mobile apps, for example, right? So you can define the intervention there, testing techniques, for example. Okay, and the comparison is that if let's say you would like to compare the intervention with something else. Okay, but this is not compulsory. Maybe you just want to see the intervention without having comparison. Okay, and then outcomes. Outcomes would be what would be the effect of the intervention? What will be the outcomes of the intervention? For example, you wanted to see how good the testing technique is. Okay, how effective the approach is. So that will be the outcome, right? And the context, you can specify, for example, the setting or the environment. For example, are you just looking at the industry point of view? Or are you looking only at academic point of view, or are you looking at generic, everything? Okay, so this just to help you to frame, the literature review. So okay, I'll give you one example from K-Chanam studies, SLR. So she conducted SLR comparing the estimation, cost estimation models, okay, between cross company versus within company, and she conducted a systematic review on software project, a software or web project only. So she is interested to look at the only cost estimation model related to software project or web project, and then the intervention is they are looking at the effort estimation model to be compared cross company and a single company. So they wanted to see the comparison between these two method models. And the outcomes is that they wanted to see in terms of prediction, estimation, and accuracy of the model. And they don't define any context. Okay, this is one example. So PICO is not mandatory for SLR. As I said, this is an option for you. But from my experience, you have defined the PyCore is very good because it helps you to clearly define the framework of your SLR. For example, like what I did in the past 10 years, this is my SLR. I did empirical studies of pair programming for computer science and software engineering teaching in higher education. At that time, pair programming has been used so much in industry as well as in academia. So a lot of research work has been done in this thing. But I was wondering at that point of time whether is this really good or not. If it is something good, why don't we use it in our lab, right? So I was looking at the population of higher education, and then I am interested to study the specific intervention of pair programming, and I don't intend to compare because there are studies that not doing comparison, but there are also some studies that compare pair programming with solo programming, for example. And the outcome is like, I would like to see studies that see how effective pair programming has been, okay? And the context is within the higher education. So this is clear, okay? So that's the focus of the review. So with that PyCorp in mind, right? So I was actually interested to see evidence available about pair programming. So I come up with this primary research question. So in formulating the question, there is no rule. For example, you have to come up with 3 questions or 4 questions. No, it's up to you. Maybe you just have 1 question, that is fine. Okay, but maybe you have 1 big question, maybe you have few sub questions, that is fine. But I never see, I've so far never seen people do SLR with a lot of questions. Because maybe if you have so many questions, maybe there is too much, I would say, things that you wanted to achieve. So maybe it's good to have small number of questions. From my experience, I have seen less than 5 questions is good enough. Okay. I have seen SLR with just 1 question, so that is fine. The question is just something that will guide you to do the review, right? For example, here I was asking, what sort of evidence are available about pair programming conducted in higher education settings that investigated pair programming's effectiveness, and also the pair compatibility in education, in computer science and software engineering. These are the big questions. So I was interested to see it in terms of the compatibility factors among the pairs, because a lot of research are arguing about this thing. How do they achieve compatibility in pair? And then how do they measure the effectiveness of pair programming? Okay, how effective has pair programming been used? And how quality was measured in the study that is software quality as a measure of pair programming's effectiveness. Okay, I would like to highlight one thing here. When you formulate the questions, you will never come up with a perfect question the first time. Okay, so don't spend a lot of time or too much time, like 1 month. No, because your question will always be refined. Okay, because when you start your literature review, you have done some sort of background reading about the area, I'm sure. You cannot start research with 0 reading, okay? You cannot start your review without reading. So having read a few articles, it gives you more deeper knowledge about the area that you are researching. And eventually that will help you to refine your question. So refining question is something common even until the stage where you select the studies, I think, to that point. So from my experience, it took a while for me to actually come up with a good question. Initially, because I just want to get going, so I just come up with 1 question, but initially maybe not that good question, but something about pair programming, but I'm not too sure what I wanted to study, all right, in terms of the focus, in terms of the deeper focus of this topic. So when we read more, when we do more reading about the topic, you will eventually able to refine your question. So I would like to advise, don't panic or don't worry, okay, if you don't come up with a good research question in the beginning. Right? Life has got to move on, correct? Okay, so Okay, this is another example from Kitchenham. Okay, so for example, Kitchenham come up with 3 questions. What evidence is there about cross-company? Not the question is not necessarily what evidence. Yeah, you can ask anything. You can normally the question is what, which. You can also ask question how. Okay, yeah, which. But normally is what? What characteristics? Which experimental procedure? What testing techniques is most appropriate for da 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 da. You know? Okay. So, in the planning phase, okay, having the focus of the review by developing the research question, I would suggest that you come up with a protocol. Okay, protocol is actually just a document. Is a living document actually. Yeah, we can call it like a framework. So in that protocol, it sets up the procedures, the basic procedures that you are going to undertake for your review. For example, in the protocol, you have a little write-up about the background of the research, of the review. And then you have the research question or the review question. And then you have the search terms, what you use. And then how you select the studies, how do you perform the quality. Okay, at this point of time, it is fair. It is fair to say that you have not deeper knowledge on how to come up with a good protocol. So the point is not to come up with a complete protocol, because of course you are not expected to come up with um, uh, uh, how to say that, a comprehensive protocol, because you have just started your journey. Okay, you have just started your journey. But what is important here, at least to have a schedule. Yeah, you can sort of plan with your supervisor. Okay, have a schedule like how much time you think upon discussion with your supervisor you want to spend for this SLR. Okay, and then you have to do a little bit write up, just maybe one page like that, just to describe about what your topic is about. Okay, what review you wanted to do, and then think about the initial research question. And maybe you don't have all the details, but eventually when you do the uh, systematic research review, you will refine all those things. Okay, so protocol development is an iterative process. It's not one off. Okay, it's not one off. Okay, let me move on. It takes a lot of time just to explain that. Okay, conducting review takes 5 steps. Searching relevant studies, selecting relevant studies, assessing the quality, perform the extraction, and perform the synthesis of evidence. I hope you can bear with me for another half an hour. Talk about this thing. Are you okay with me so far or not? Well, I'm
Yes,
going to.
we're following. We're following well, Prof.
Okay, very good. Am I going too fast or too slow?
We are with you, ma.
Oh, thank you. All right. So the first step is that you have to search. You have to search for relevant studies. So I'm sure that you are familiar with searching. But this searching is not about searching just at the Google, Scholar. Yeah, you really have to follow a proper way to do the searching, and especially we rely on online databases. Okay, online databases. So the aim of this step number 1 to search is the aim is to search for all available evidence, or what we call as a primary studies. So you need to search for all available evidence to answer the review questions. So in order to search it takes exhaustive searching and comprehensive searching. Okay, how can you do the searching? I'm sure you have experience in maybe using IEEE Explore, isn't it? Or Scopus at least, right? So basically, when you define the search, this is something that students normally did not really sure how to conduct the search. Okay, so there are a couple of ways. Okay, and initially we have to come up with the preliminary search. Okay, preliminary search, because you need to know how much studies are available in that area, and I would say the coverage. If you are doing a research on a very mature topic, okay, maybe the literature maybe start from 1970s or 1960s or 1980s. So that takes like 30, 40 years of research already there, isn't it? That means it's a really old topic, it's a really old area or really matured. So in that case, you should think about refining, yeah, the topic and refining the term that you use, yeah, to search for the study. So you have to do the pilot search actually, okay, and then you need to validate your search, okay, against list of known studies. So basically, before you start your SRR, you have, like I would say, an anchor for anchor papers or anchor studies. Maybe there are 5 or 10 studies that you are very familiar with, and these are all very very important studies. Okay, so when you do a search, make sure all these 5 or 10 studies that you know appear in your search. Okay, and you should also do brainstorming or consult the experts. If possible, you should do snowballing. I'm going to explain what snowballing is. Okay. So how do you construct the search string? You have to identify what are the major terms, keywords. Yeah. What are the keywords in the research question or in the PyCork, right? What are the keywords available in the article, right? And then find out what are the synonyms, and then you need to use the Boolean or and N, yeah, to link those terms. So these are the common style. All right. I give you an example. So initially, upon the PyCork and the research question, you may have a list of long search terms. So what I suggested is for you to pilot the search first. If you can find a good number of papers, basically, if you have too long, yeah, that might give you very little results retrieved in the database. So from my experience last time at 2011, okay, I consulted subject librarian at the university, and she suggested to just use this pair programming or pair hyphen programming, and I ended up having less than 500 studies retrieved. So imagine if you are using a very strict terminology or and ended up with only very few, maybe less than 5 or less than 10. So you need to check, yeah, because maybe the term is not that good enough, right? So this is something that you have to pilot, right? Like for example, Kitchenam use even more complex search string because she has a lot of and then combined with Boolean and all this for elements of PyCork. Okay, elements of PyCork. So you can be so because in the area of estimation model, for example, if you're looking at a software project or web project, you can imagine software and then the synonym is application. The synonym is product or web or www or internet or world wide web. These are all the synonym. So combining all the synonym using N. Okay, using N, then you will get a very long string. So it really depends. It really depends on your topic. Okay, I can't say that long string is not good. No, there's no such thing. And I cannot also say that a shorter string is good. No, there's no such thing. You have to actually pilot the string. Okay, so where do we search from? You can use either online databases, and you can use Snowballing. Okay, you can do hand search as well, but very few systematic review I found doing hand search. Hand search is very taxing because you really have to do manually all the journals and conference proceedings. And you can also complement the search using search engines. But you cannot rely alone on Google Scholar, yeah, because this is not a database. It's a search engine. So you should use a proper online database subscribed by your university. Okay. For example, I'm sure that you have the access to IEEE Explore or Scopus and etc. Right? So these are just some of online databases. Are you familiar with some of these? Yeah. So
Yes, some of them.
yeah, some of them. Yeah, but unfortunately, I think for RUM you don't have access to many of these because it's not cheap. It's expensive. I don't know, NSUK have subscription to all of this or some of this. Yeah, because I think in our university, in RIUM, we have very few. We have IEEE Explore, Scopus. We don't have ACM. Science Direct, we have only until 2016. Emerald Insight, I'm not sure we have or not. Yeah, I'm not
We
sure.
used to have last time. I think quite a number of them has been cut down.
Yeah, it's been cut down a lot. Yeah, right. Unfortunately, but for computer science and software engineering, we don't use all of this. Okay, we primarily depend on our Web of Science, IEEE Explore, Clarivate, IEEE Explore, Scopus, ACM, Science Direct. I think the first 5 years. And sometimes in Wiley as well, in Teller. And EBSCOhost also there are related to information systems. Okay? Okay, just now I mentioned about snowballing, right? So how do
Sorry,
we do
Prof.
this?
Does
Yeah.
Google Scholar also come in here in any way?
No, I didn't put it because Google Scholar is not online database. Google Scholar is a search engine. So what's the difference between on database and in search engine? You see search engine and online database because online databases has specific features. For example, you can put an advanced comments. Have you tried the advanced comments in database? Whereby in search engine, you have very limited way to search, isn't it? For example, you cannot trim down to certain focus, you cannot trim down to certain. Are you with me? When you are using online databases, you can use a lot of features available. Okay, so what I'm saying here, you can use Google Scholar to complement your search. Or for example, you want to find specific study. Okay, you can still use Google Scholar, but this is not the primary I would say resources. Yeah, the primary sources. Sorry, the primary source should come from online databases. Okay.
Understood.
Okay. All right. So what is snowballing? All right. Snowballing is that when you are reading a paper, did you notice at the end of the paper there is a section called reference or references, right? So that list contains a number of studies, references, maybe 20, 30, 50, isn't it? References. So snowballing is that when you select a study to be considered in your SLR, let's say at the end of the day, you decided to select 10 studies, okay? You have to look at every single studies appear in the list of references. And then this is what we call as backward snowball, okay? So backward snowballing is referring to what the paper is citing. Whereas forward snowballing is to see what papers or studies have cited that particular study that you are reading. Forward, backward. Okay. So for SLR, most of the time we just do backward snowballing. One iteration. Okay, I have seen an SLR that do until third iteration. So you can imagine what I mean by iteration. That means, let's say in the backward snowballing process, you found maybe another 5 studies. So that 5 studies you have to again do backward snowball. That is second iteration. And then again, you see, so you can be to that extent, all right, in searching the studies. This is the purpose is to ensure that you will not miss any important studies. Because when you search from these databases, sometimes you might discover that your search term may be not good enough, isn't it? And maybe you miss some important studies that maybe not even indexed in online databases. Not everything are indexed. Some studies I would say I think like thesis. We don't really use thesis, okay, in SLR or books is excluded. But research papers normally index in proceedings or index in any of these online databases, especially good ones, right? But some people who submit papers to conferences, sometimes the conferences are not properly indexed, right? So when the conference is not being indexed, you cannot see the paper when you search from databases. So how did you know the study? That's why if you do this snowballing, you will eventually, lucky enough, will find those papers. But there is one, you need to also be careful there, because studies that are not indexed, sometimes you have to see the quality first. Maybe there's a reason why certain conference is not being indexed in any databases. Okay. All right, now step 2, after you have searched, and then you need to select the studies. So selecting the studies, you need to define what we call as an inclusion and exclusion criteria. All right, so the first step when you want to select is that you have to read the titles, the abstracts, and the keywords. Okay, so if let's say once you search it, and then you come out, like for example, there are 500 or maybe 100 studies, let's say 100 studies. There are 100 titles you have to read, 100 abstracts you have to read, and then the keywords as well. So having defining the inclusion will help you to decide whether the paper is relevant or not. So the selection can result in inclusion, exclusion, or no decision. Yes. Sometimes you don't know how to decide. Sometimes you just ended up with, I'm not sure whether this paper is relevant or not. This is common because we are not sure by reading the title, reading the abstract. It looks like relevant, but not sure. Okay, so we call it as KIV, or no decision at that point of time. So if you have this set of papers where you don't know whether it should be a yes or no, okay, you have to read the introduction, and then you have to read the conclusion. Or from my experience, most of the time when the title and abstract is not helpful enough, I have read the whole paper, okay, just to see whether the study is actually relevant or not. So that's why this SLR is taxing. It's taxing because of the, I would say, the rigidity. Why we have to be rigid? We have to be rigid because we do not want to include everything according to our interests. Okay, so we have to be fair and professional here in the sense that the studies that we are including are studies that are relevant only. So those that are not relevant is out of our scope. That's why we have to be very, very clear what we wanted to search, what we wanted to include. So we call it as inclusion criteria. What kind of study is relevant? So you have to define a statement, right? For example, here I just wanted to see studies on pair programming. I'm not interested on other things on pair programming, but for example, in industry, maybe that is not the focus because there are already humongous research in terms of how good this technique is in higher education. You know, so I would like to see how good it is. And then you also have to define the exclusion criteria. Okay, when are you actually setting up all these criteria? At the beginning or at the middle? Okay, as I told you, as a beginner, as a novice researcher, we don't do we cannot do things perfect at the first time. Okay, as I said, these things are eventually going to be refined and refined. Okay, so maybe by the time you are reading the paper, then you discover, these are the things, this paper looks interesting, but no, it is something that is not really what I would like to review. So you have to define that in the exclusion criteria. For example, in my exclusion criteria here, I was excluding studies that just talking about opinion without evidence, because you know some authors, they just provide claims, but there is no evidence, no data that backing up their claims. So that is like a conceptual studies kind of thing. There's no data, how can I rely on, right? And then talking about other than programming like theory factoring or test first programming, talking about specific tools, and papers not written in English, because I found papers written in Russian, I think. A few languages that is not that I'm familiar with. So it is out of the context, okay? So I hope you are clear now about the step 2. So yeah, first if you have to search, and then you have to select, and then you have to assess the study quality. So this is another thing. assessing the study quality is not really, I would say, being done thoroughly or appropriately if you are doing the normal way we do review, because normally people don't really care about the quality, isn't it? Because we are more interested in the, I would say, the paper, the topic. Or maybe when the paper is presenting something that that is aligned to our interests, okay? So there is a tendency to be biased there, okay? Because sometimes even though the study quality is poor, unfortunately, those studies also appear or even publish. Okay, this is happening. Okay, some studies that are not properly conducted eventually got published. This is common, and therefore, when we do SLR, it's very important for us to assess the level of quality. So, talking about level of quality, this is subjective. Okay, but we need to know and understand why we have to check the quality of the study. Okay, this is very important, yeah, because if you don't assess, if you don't measure the quality of the study, we might end up including studies that are not good quality. All right. So how do we know that studies are good or not? Okay. So at least you can see that the study is being conducted properly in terms of the methodology, and then the authors is always trying to minimize bias in their research and maximize the validity, whether internal or external validity. So this is something that is a bit challenging for novice researcher. But however, don't worry, because there are a lot of support out there. For example, Kitchener and Charters, in guidelines by Kitchener and Charters, they have compiled a lot of checklist questions. Okay, so we can actually refer to those available set of questions that have been compiled, and then we will actually adopt some of it. Okay, assessing quality of studies involves evaluating or appraising the methodology or design of the study and analysis of the findings, because these two parts is normally what makes the studies reliable. Okay, whether the methodology is correct or not, whether the finding has been analyzed properly or not. Okay, so these two things. So example. So these are example of quality checklist in my paper. Okay, for example, I have these 7 questions. And then I give a scoring. Yes, no, partially. So as you can see here, whether the articles referred or not, whether the aims is settled or not, whether the study participants are adequately described or not, whether data collection carried out or not. So the answer is binary. So all these questions is setting out whether the paper is of good quality if let's say all of these are answered yes. Okay, but some papers, maybe they are not really properly done in terms of data collections. Okay, so maybe you can answer no or partially. All right, so the score can be 7 out of 7 maximum. Okay, poor quality maybe 0 out of 7. But I think highly likely no lah. All right. So and then after we have checked the quality, right? Next is that we have to perform the data extraction. Okay, so what is data extraction? So data extraction is the process where you are extracting important data or important information from the studies. Okay, so remember that what you extract is something that is useful for you to answer the research question or review questions. So you have to read the full text article for this stage. And this is the longest, I guess, if you have a lot of studies included in your SLR, it will take a lot of time for you to read the whole full text and then to extract the data. So in order for you to do this extraction effectively, you need to design a data extraction form. So you can use maybe an Excel sheet or Google spreadsheet. Okay, if you, let's say you are doing this literature review with your supervisor, Then you can maybe create one Google spreadsheet. Okay, and then you can I would say define what you want to extract from the data. For example, you want to extract the publication details. Okay, you want to extract what the method they use, how they analyze, and then what are their results, what are their findings, Okay, you can design according to the needs, because you need to know what you want to find out. Okay. All right. So these are the common extraction template. Okay. So normally in your I normally use this Google spreadsheet because my collaborators is worldwide. So it's easy for you to actually discuss, when you share things on a cloud. So there are 3 elements here, maybe in terms of demographics. Yeah, the demographics information you might need to extract who are the authors, which year they published, what is the title of the paper, from where you get the paper, what is the abstract says, what is the main topic, and the aim of the study. Okay, for extraction, it's okay to copy paste because you're here, you are not writing up things, but it's good if you can write, you can extract using your own words. Okay, for example, you simplify what the topic is, what the aim is, and then what the subjects of the studies is about, what sort of technologies, what kind of settings, what instruments do they use, what are the type of the study, whether you conduct survey or whether they conduct simulation, whether they conduct experiment, whether they conduct case study, All right. And then in terms of the findings, the finding is that, for example, normally in the result section, okay, they will discuss what is the result from their simulation, for example. Okay, you might take verbatim text, okay, or if they maybe conduct experiments, so maybe you can also gather data in terms of the strength of their evidence. Okay. So lastly, okay, this is the last one. After you have done a lot of extraction, maybe like 100 studies you have to extract, right? So in the end of the day, you're gonna think, how are you going to make sense of all this data? Looking at the humongous data that you have extracted, right, or gathered, then in the end of the day, how are you going to synthesize all these things? This is the hardest part. This is the brain, the brain part, where you have to organize the findings. So the purpose of the synthesis is to organize findings from the included studies to provide an initial description of patterns across the studies. What does it mean? It means it's not only summarizing. This is what we normally do, isn't it? You summarize. Study 1, that say da-da-da-da-da-da. Study 2, say da-da-da-da-da-da. Study 3, say da-da. Bunyamin, say da-da-da-da-da. It's a summary. Summary is not synthesizing. You just summarize. There's no analysis there, isn't it? This is the problem with, this is the mistake that most students do in their thesis. They don't highlight what are the gaps. They don't highlight what are the analysis of findings. Okay, so happen in your chapter 2 normally in your thesis, right? So what is important in the synthesis of evidence is not only to collate or to collecting, summarizing results. Not only that, it involves, yes, of course, because you have to summarize the results in a way that you understand the results. But the most important thing is to provide the interpretation of the findings. How do you see the relationships? For example, if let's say there are 10 studies talking about effectiveness of certain tools, how do you compare these 10 studies? Are they all agreeable to each other or not? Or are they contradictory among each other? If they are contradictory, why? Can that why be answered or not from the data that you have extracted? So this is a bit not tricky, this is a bit challenging because we have to put our thought in it, okay? Because you have to immerse yourself into the data. I think I'm running out of time, right? Okay, already 6:12. Okay, I'm almost there, almost finished. So how do we synthesize? There are actually many ways, but you can do descriptive and numerical. So this descriptive is just use of words and text, okay? But then you have to use a textual approach to tell the story of the findings. Because now, when you synthesize, you are not talking about findings from one study. You are talking about findings from multiple studies. How do you aggregate this? How do you aggregate all those findings? What patterns do you see from their findings? Okay, so you can do either narrative, thematic analysis, you can do meta-ethnography. There are many techniques you can do. I don't think I have time to, but I am putting here as your point of reference, okay? And you can do even meta-analysis, okay? If there are lots of quantitative data, okay? For example, maybe they report their means and the standard deviation. So you can actually aggregate those using meta-analysis. So you can see the differences in their results. And this, in this meta-analysis, for example, you can compute the effect size, average effect size, and that can tell the strength of findings. All right. So these are some of the sample of published SLR from myself and my students, my PhD students. Some references. Yep, that's it. Thank you very much. I think I'm gonna stop sharing. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Success takes time. And keep going. Okay. Are you still there with me?
Thank you so much, Prof. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, everybody's there.
I tried to be very fast, but not to miss important points. So now, please, if you have any question, I don't know how much time we have, but if you have any questions, do let me know.
Just okay, Prof. Thank you very much. We've all had your contribution, your sharing. Perhaps we give the students the opportunity to interact with you. First, I think we have some people online with you, and some are in the class here, in the hall here. So anybody that has a question from those online, please. Anybody that has questions should signify so that we can give the person the opportunity to talk.
Yes, please.
Jefferson.
And it's too small, right? But that is the thing that he found because he was studying software process improvement for companies that conducted, I think, web project, if I'm not mistaken. So he's zoom, the topic. So in the end of the day, he could only found 5 studies. Well, by all means, go for it. So he ended up publishing a good literature review just by 5 studies. Okay, my experience when I did this pair programming, it has been there for about 10 years. So when I searched the term pair programming, it gives me around, I said 300, I think, 300 studies. It's a lot. And at the end of the day, I selected 74 studies. So 74 studies is huge, but I cannot remove them because they are relevant. You see? So there is no magic number there. It really depends on the topic that you choose, how depth the topic is. If you do something very generic, like for example, cloud computing in education, it's very generic, isn't it? You might end up reaching, I think, a lot of studies. But if you focus your review, because when you do your PhD, you are not doing something generic. You have a focus, isn't it? Specific focus. So that should be your literature review. So to answer your question, no, there is no magic number. Okay, there is no good number. There isn't. There is no such magic number. But you really have to know that the maturity of your research area, how much papers you found, So that have to be included as long as they are relevant. I hope they got something from the talk today.
I thought you meant like the screenshot of, those who are like online currently.
Yeah, the online.
Okay, so that
For
those who want to bring, yes, if you want to show
people, the people who are here are like 100. They are greeting you.
Yeah, I can see them. Nice to see all of you.
For those who are
yeah.
like online, not in the, I mean, those who are online.
It's a huge lab, yeah? It's in the lab? It's huge.
Yes, it's a lab. It's a lab. We
Ah,
call it CBT lab.
I see. Very nice. Okay, now I hope that all of you get something from the system just now. Hopefully it's useful. Nice to meet all of you.
It's a big pleasure, Prof. It's a pleasure to meet
Thank you very much for the invitation.